Hello, my name's Adam G, and I conceived and produced In Your Face, Confronting Tattoo Prejudice. The film is about facial and neck tattoos and the way that people react to them, and whether there's prejudice widespread against them, particularly in the UK. It's done as a social experiment, so we test out how people behave with the same people when they have tattoos and when the tattoos are removed using specialist makeup. The story was inspired by a couple of things. One was seeing a book in which a photographer, and I'm afraid I can't remember his name, had photoshopped out the tattoos of gang members in the States, spent dozens and dozens of hours photoshopping out their tattoos and then eventually presenting them as clean-skinned people, and then showing those pictures back to the subjects of the pictures to see how they reacted. And for the most part they reacted with great emotion because they could see the path that they didn't travel. So I thought that would be a really interesting thing to do in the UK. I thought there would be cultural differences because most tattoos are of that kind are associated in the States with gang culture, whereas there's not that same kind of connection exactly in the UK. It was also inspired to some degree by, once I got the initial idea, just looking at people on the tube that had facial and neck tattoos and noticing my own reaction. And one I remember in particular was quite a mild-mannered looking guy with quite kind of geeky glasses, but he had a neck tattoo on his neck, and I was really surprised by my own reaction to him because I had this kind of feeling of incipient violence, even though the guy was kind of nerdy in a way. So it's a very powerful reaction, and that's what I really wanted to plug into. One of the things I really wanted to do with the film was to make sure that we weren't judgmental and that we gave the contributors a fair hearing and didn't just dismiss them in some way. One of the most difficult things about shooting this subject matter was being able to get the makeup sufficiently good that you would buy the clean version of our protagonists. So obviously in the book the tattoos were photoshopped out, the book that had inspired the original thought, and then when it came to the film we had to use specialist makeup and a really good makeup artist who we'd worked with before on a series we made for Channel 4 called Naked and Invisible. So she was outstanding really in covering up some very difficult tattoos and facial adornments. The film was funded by Little Dot Studios for their Real Stories channel, which is a documentary channel mostly on YouTube, also on Facebook and other social media, and it was one of the first originals made for Real Stories. I've been making films since I was 23 when I left uni, and I'm now ancient and I'm still making them, and when I've got a big long white beard and a pipe I'll still be making them, and until they nail down the box I'll still be making them. If I was making the film again, there's not a great deal I would change. I am always a kind of bang on about kind of narrative really, and the more narrative one can get into these kind of films the better to drive people through. So I guess anything that might have added to the narrative dimension, but by and large I think we did a good job with it. One of the things about this film is we really had to think on our feet. Not everything that we shot turned out as we expected. So, for example, I'd instructed the director to make a lot of the shot where each of the protagonists gets to see what they look like clean for the first time. And the reaction wasn't what we expected, because the equivalent in the US had been people kind of breaking down and thinking about the life they could have led and a different path they could have taken as represented by their clean face. But in the UK, the reaction was completely different, and people hated what they looked like clean because their identity had gone, and it's all a form of self-expression. So that was different, and we had to go with that, and the emotion was completely different. So instead of regret, it was anger and desperation to get back to themselves. And similarly, the reaction of people to their tattoos was much milder than we expected, and people were much more tolerant. So again, we had to incorporate that into the story of the film. But that's what's great about filmmaking. Journalism, you have an idea, you go out and shoot pictures to convey your idea. But filmmaking, you go out with your notion and you see how that plays out in the real world. And it's not always the way you expect. And good filmmakers will adapt accordingly, and they'll come back with whatever the truth of the situation is. The people who inspire me as a filmmaker, first and foremost, Charlie Chaplin. Why? Apart from the fact he was a total genius, he worked really, really hard at what he did, and he put his heart and soul into it. So he would be my number one inspiration, to the degree that my second son, his middle name is Charlie, and that's who he's named after. I've just finished a short recently. It's called They Saw the Sun First, and it was made for Red Bull Media House, and it's very distinctive and different for that particular commissioner, because it's a human interest story done with a lot of imagination. So please do go and check it out. They Saw the Sun First. Also, Simon and I, who made In Your Face, made a follow-up called Even More In Your Face, where we tried to turn the wheel, another twist, and brought some new elements to the format. For example, a woman who thought she wanted a facial tattoo, and we gave her a temporary one so she could test out whether she was sure, and that made for some really interesting stuff, and what she expected and what happened were entirely different. So you can find that also on Real Stories, Even More In Your Face.